Well, Dante and the Damned Dozen have reached their accommodation for the night, and they've encountered a couple of familiar faces. Those are not planning to kill them on sight. Sometime after that, after they settled into their accommodation, it was clearly on nighttime lighting. Dante realized that Honglu was missing when they were spending time talking with the others. They didn't notice him go into his room. They decided to walk to the exits, intending to look for Honglu outside. They then ran into Jia Sichun and Wei, who stayed in the room closest to the door. Well, close to the door anyway. Jia Sichun noted that it was both late and that they were going alone without a guard, wanting to know why. Dante then said that they were looking for Honglu. Then she remembered a slight flaw in asking them. She can't understand what they're saying. Dante understood this much. Dante understood that with communication with others that weren't the Damned Dozen, there were two types of people. The first type usually say what they think without pausing or caring to hear the reply, such as Dongrang, Hubert, and Ahab. Those that weren't looking to communicate, that sympathize things on their end, if insulting, that they don't recognize them as human, or rather, as a clock on the wall. The other type is the kind that reads them so well they might as well be able to hear what they're saying. That's definitely Virgilius. The pitch of their ticking and their body language and even expressions, like how Don Quixote seems to notice. As for Jia Sichun, who suspected that they were getting some early morning air, asking if prosthetic heads need to breathe, she didn't belong to either category. Dante nervously denied this, saying that they were looking for Honglu. He wasn't seen for a while. Jia Sichun understood this to mean that she suspected wrong. She then asked if they were looking for something to eat. Dante understood her to be one that tries to figure out what they're saying without asking for help. Why does no one think of getting some form of writing method? That would make things much easier when the Damned Dozen aren't around. Wei advised her to wake or find one of the others to translate. Jia Sichun understood that if it was that important, they'd do it themselves. She wanted to know what was the hand gesture that they made when they first asked, bringing their index fingers up to their cheeks, for a lack of a better description. This was because Honglu smiled most of the time. They did this gesture to simulate that smile to convey that they were looking for him. Wei thought that it was to express cuteness or beauty. Dante was surprised by that assessment, and not in a good way. They were trying to express a smiling face. They understood that this wasn't going to be easy. Especially as Jia Sichun thought that the ticking was growing in frequency and believed that Wei was onto something. They eventually got the right message across. Jia Sichun understood that Dante was looking for her older brother. She directed them to the lounge back there, finding out that this was what they were trying to communicate, which made her annoyed and disappointed. She had something to tell Dante as well, but the mood was ruined. It can wait for another time. Dante didn't think that it was a good time to ask her about that or how she was feeling. It would take too long. So they left her alone, after nodding to express their gratitude before heading to where Honglu was, who was gazing at a hazy scene out the opaque window. Dante asked what he was doing there. He cheerfully said, "People watching." "Let me guess. The birds can't get into Hongwan." He was observing people stumbling through the streets outside. As Dante stared outside the window, Honglu understood why they were there, asking if they were worried for them. Dante was, as they understood that he was next, and Honglu was fully aware of this. He's back in his home district and everyone is talking about the family hierarch selection. But they don't have to worry about him at all, because he didn't wish for anything from Limbus Company. Let's see, Gregor likely wished to be free from his biomimetic arm, which hasn't come to reality yet. Radia likely wanted to have a means to improve the lives of others in her home district. Sinclair wanted to be free from his past, which in a way happened as Chroma is no longer going to torment him. Yisang wanted to break free of what was holding him back. Ishmael wanted vengeance against one that sought to control her and discard her. Heathcliff wanted to be with Catherine, which would require that he restore her existence. That's still ongoing. And Don Quixote wanted to be free of her bloodthirst, which was preventing her from removing Rocinante without going insane. This surprised Dante. Honglu was not like Yisang. He didn't hide his true feelings. None gave him a wonderful promise that they would help him recover his torn and broken wings. He joined only to have some new experiences. That was all. So he's doing this for fun? Like I'm suspecting Ryushu to do so, except in Honglu's case, it's the more harmless kind of fun, rather than the Blood Knight kind of fun. Now, to put it into perspective, in Honglu's head, I wouldn't be surprised if he had Everything is Awesome by Tegan and Sara from the Lego movie in his head. All of the time. While Ryushu likely has Get Ready to Die by Andrew W.K. in her head all the time. Dante was sure that something was definitely going to happen, and it will likely shake him to the core. Even if he didn't wish for anything, it might be too much for him. Honglu was aware of that. He's used to being led by the will of others. He can't do this like everyone else. Regardless of what happens, that's how it's always been. Whatever happens to him or those around him, he'll... And before Honglu can finish that sentence, a loud, boisterous bellow cut him off. It was Heathcliff angrily telling Gregor to let go of him. Telling him to just listen to Honglu talk and tell him not to be angry about that. So he didn't like the idea that Honglu signed up for fun. And Gregor told him to lower his voice. And Dante asked, what were they doing back there? Hiding behind the entrance door? Who revealed themselves after being detected. Gregor regretted coming with Heathcliff as he was incapable of being patient for a few minutes before bursting out there. Dante asked how long were those two there. Heathcliff told them that it was from the start. He wasn't angry about Honglu signing up for such a mindless reason as fun. It was because he was used to following others' will. Honglu didn't mean to provoke his ire. It was simply the truth. This only increased Heathcliff's annoyance, asking Gregor if he's supposed to practice patience after listening to that drivel. Gregor believed so, even though he called him Buggy Bloke. He did as well. he said with irritation in his voice. And this wasn't what Heathcliff meant, as he was silenced, which was a relief to Gregor, who apologized for listening in. He let them in on a big secret if they let this one slide. And Dante wanted to know, and Gregor rubbed his arm awkwardly as Dante stared at him in silence, then pointed at a pillar in an exaggerated motion, asking if he can guess who's hiding behind that pillar. Then two revealed themselves from behind that. Sinclair felt betrayed by Gregor. Ryushu said, BWAHA, or Boha, which Sinclair translated as bad, weak, and highly annoying. Good night, snoozefests. She gave him a look, Sinclair asking if he got it wrong. She told him that she never said GNS, asking when did he get a FU, or functionality upgrade. She looked at Sinclair with interest before slicing open the ceiling above the entrance. This caused a black ink-like substance to drip from the floor, followed by Rodian Urutis, who landed on Ryushu, who said GTFO, or get the off. Honglu didn't realize that he had such an audience for his story. Urutis was embarrassed by this. She intended to protect them, concerned for their safety, not for amusement. Yes, concerned for Dante's safety. Roger was just bored, and Dante didn't know what to say. Honglu asked them if they could continue the conversation after a brief silence. Dante's their patience ran out, and he shouted at them to get back to their rooms. After what just happened, they all went back into their rooms, only for Utis to be there, and she objected to leaving Dante on their own. She asked if they were sure about this. Dante nervously told her not to worry about it. They're usually taking the night watch on the bus regardless. Utis reminded Dante that this was uncharted territory for them. They don't have much experience sleeping at a place where safety was not guaranteed. Ishmael told her that they're right next door to them. It'll take less than 5 seconds to come over if something happens. Utis saw that every second counted in emergencies. Roger decided to help Utis to get out of there. They eventually left the room, gently closing the door behind them. Dante turned the lights off and could finally get some peace and quiet. They sat on the corner of the bed and could relax for once. They didn't need to sleep like the others did, but the fatigue doesn't go away on its own. They needed time to relax and empty their thoughts. They might have gotten used to the pain of what I could only describe as empathic healing via time inversion, but it still hurts like hell to do so. The longer the journey, the more frequent and severe the injuries became. They got stronger, but so did their enemies, which meant that the clock never rested. They thought of the star, before the great gates that they faced with every revival, witnessing the intricate engravings and felt the slight vibrations. Even after a year, they're no closer to understanding them. But emptying their thoughts and taking in the sights calmed them down. They then felt a cool and crisp wind, which snapped them back to reality, asking if a window had opened. But the breeze wouldn't open the window like that, not without making a noise. They then turned to where the window was supposed to be, only to see a melted wall and an intruder slinking through the opening. Dante wanted to know who this was. The intruder was silent, and not understanding them regardless. Dante rolled off the bed to get out of the way of the intruder's sword, but a blade was ready at where the neck and head met. It would just take a little nudge and the head would be off. Before a sound was made, Dante thought Urtis was fueled by paranoia when she didn't want to leave Dante alone. Well, paranoia is an imagined threat. This one was quite real. And just as they were about to make a final struggle, regretting not listening to Urtis, the intruder was attacked by Ryushu, who called their blade pathetically thin, too delicate to have Dante CIH, or cut in half. She apparently leapt down from the ceiling as if she was a ninja, deflecting the dagger away from Dante, who was relieved to see her. Ryushu snuck in thinking that she was about to see something interesting, but all she saw was a beast with steel. The paint-like liquid was dripping from the opening in the ceiling, like with what Gregor exposed earlier. Urtis rushed in, asking Dante if they were unharmed. She instructed Ryushu that the ceiling had room to hide in. Ryushu told her to shut up and help her, as she struggled with the assassin. Urtis mockingly asked if that one was just some beast with steel. Ryushu made it clear that if she was at her full strength, she'd cut the beast down, sword and all. Then Dante remembered Hohenheim and what he said. "All of your abilities were diminished the moment you were hired by this company, equally defanged and depowered, if you will." This was what he meant, as Ryushu was as weak as Sinclair was. Ryushu said NFW, or no way. What is happening? And just as she was struggling to stop that one blade, the intruder pulled out another dagger and slashed at Ryushu's neck. Wei came in and recognized the intruder as a beast of the Haishu pack. This surprise prevented the intruder from cutting Ryushu's throat. Wei asked who wielded them now. The intruder was silent, and Wei understood that dialogue without a question. Then the intruder chanted, "Light entered not the vast garden, yet falls a star into its fathom still." This had an adverse effect on Wei's mind as the intruder made that incantation. He reached into his clothes, and Ryushu recognized it as a talisman. The intruder was then taken out by Ja Zichun, who told him to get it together. Wei acknowledged her presence. She asked if he was going to let him finish his spell. He almost activated the Q-Corp talisman. Wei apologized for this. He was still somewhat bound by the spell. She told him that he's no longer a Haishu. He serves her now. He doesn't have to let them control him anymore. Wei understood and apologized for that. Dante laughed nervously, falling limply to the bed with the sudden alleviation of stress and pressure. Ja Sichun was about to ask Dante if they were fine, but remembered that they couldn't understand them regardless. Wei told her that he was able to stop the assassin before any physical harm was done. Fortunately. Ja Sichun understood and didn't think that anyone else was there, wanting to switch the lights on. Which she did. Ja Sichun recognized that Haishu is from the Mao branch. On the ground was a black bamboo hat-wearing assassin. Dante saw the walls. They were solid before they all went to sleep, but they were now melting away. Yes, melting away as if they were part of a Salvador Dali painting. Wei noticed something wrong with that building. Ja Sichun understood that they did something to that building. Wei asked how is a Haishu there. Ja Sichun understood that it's an operation spearheaded by someone with real power, not from an overexcited family hierarch contestant. She didn't understand why the Mao branch. There are better Haishu branches to use if all they wanted was to cut Dante's head off. This was clearly for a different purpose. Wei saw this as true, since they're from the Mao branch of the Haishu pack. More of them are likely there. They move in groups. although not on the scale of the Z branch. He suspected their goal was to kill all the Nkaezan, including her. She knew that they had to keep moving. They can't let them surround them if they want to stand a chance of surviving this. Then Don Quixote burst in, shouting. Then she saw that Dante was quite safe. Jia Zichun told her to thank her later. As if they don't move, they're as good as dead. Wei backed her up on that, and Jia Zichun didn't see that they had time to contact the main forces of their faction at the family mansion, asking Wei if if he knew what to do when the enemy had superior numbers. Wei would carry this out as they both stormed out of the room, doing so as soon as they saw that those that survived the assassination waiting to protect Dante. Massault was covered in battle wounds. Gregor and Don Quixote were on edge. Urtis and Ryushu were more battle-ready than anything. Urtis felt shame. She needed to borrow the hands of another to protect them. Ryushu had a look on her face that said, "Spare me." Dante admitted that they should have listened to what she said. Massault could extrapolate from the pattern that the walls disintegrated had an identical method used. Well, certainly for infiltration for each of them. Dante asked if there were attacks as well. Don Quixote confirmed this. They were many, yet unsettlingly silent. Yes, unsettlingly silent, and they were almost... Gregor disputed this angrily as he saw some on the way there that did get killed, impaled straight through the guts. Dante understood that the taboo of fighting indoors being a taboo mentioned by Queen Tao, and Urtis saw this as a lie. This incensed Don Quixote. She saw them as cowards to strike from the shadows. They had no time to think about this. Urtis agreed with this. Dante knew what she meant. Urtis saw more of them coming, and so those that was able to fought the Haishu Pack Mao branch. They're weak to slash and strong against blunts. They primarily rupture their foes, with their clash power increasing if enough ruptures on their targets. If they attack those with the death rights status that they inflict more rupture counts. They also inflict more rupture or rupture count if the speed of their target is slower. They also become faster when they're ready to counterattack. They were able to make do with what they had and fought off the first group of them. So Wei was a former Haishu, and it appears that they favor using Q-Corp talismans, likely made from a singularity from District 16 that has a variety of effects, including mind control apparently when an incantation is spoken to activate them. The singularity can also be infused into their weapons to enhance them, in the form of glyphs. Well, if the Haishu Pack stories are an indication, it's likely that the building that they're in is another application of this singularity. Buildings that can be made and so easily removed, either as a better accommodation than tents, or in this case, to set up an elaborate trap. It makes me think, was Ryushu just familiar with that item? Or was she either someone that lived in District 16 for a time, much as Yi Sang lived in District 20 after moving from District 19? Or was Ryushu a local of District 16? After fighting more of the Mao branch of the Haishu Pack, Otis believed that they were safe for now. Dante suspected that this wasn't their full force, but at least they've been routed, hoping this meant something. Then they asked where Don Quixote went. She then appeared, making sure that they know that she's not dead again. She checked on the others, and they were indeed targeted as well. Most of the others defending themselves well and shall be there quickly. Yet, Gregor completed that sentence by saying that not everyone survived. Don Quixote spoke of Sinclair and Yi Sang. They rose and fought them. And they were killed as they didn't see it coming. They tripped over each other's feet. Likely they were in a double room. Otis saw this as embarrassing. Don Quixote continued by speaking of Heathcliff. Gregor asked how they got to him, if he's the resident mob fight expert. Then Heathcliff walks in and denies that they got him. He's fine! Dante wasn't sure what to make of this. Then Don Quixote noticed something. Heathcliff wanted to know what she was silent about. She saw a blade piercing him in the back of the head, asking if Dante inverted time for him. Dante said, "No, not yet." This surprised Heathcliff, who checked and then realized what the funny itch on the back of his head. Then something out of a dark comedy scene happened. He rubbed the back of his head and then he crumpled to the floor. He was dead. Dante asked how he managed to walk all the way over there with a hole in his head. Don Quixote was distressed by this. Basalt told Dante that the others are starting to gather. Otis understood that, while their force was pathetic as it was, they can't spare any hands at that point. They needed to join forces with the others. Fighting was occurring in the lobby. Dante understood. They inverted time for all of those that were dead, and sometime later, Queen Tao asked them to hold on a moment. Otis was confronting him. Some people were still in the lobby, which was melting like a building made of butter when it's too close to an open fire. Jia Zichun was clashing with one of the Haishu pack. She saw that her opponent was going on the offensive already, asking how a big shot in control of a Haishu pack decided to come after small fries like them. Queen Tao was amused by how they tracked him down. Certain of their safety, but his master had already prepared countermeasures. Wei was threatening him with his sword. Otis understood that he was behind this. Queen Tao recognized her. She figured out that he'd be planning something like that, but he lacked the patience to pull it off. Queen Tao saw her as quite observant, thinking that he'd completely won her over. Otis had nothing to say about that. Then Queen Tao told her that in District 8 there's only one path to survival and riches. Choose a family hierarch candidate and serve them with utter loyalty. Who would serve Jia Baiyu? He grew up with no hardship and doesn't possess even a single speck of ambition. This he flipped off, telling him to shut his mouth, and then he asked Hong Lu if he's just going to sit there and let the bloke talk him to his face. Hong Lu then told him that he's not wrong about him. He doesn't have any ambitions. Heathcliff asked if he had any self-respect. What did he have anyway? Jia Zichun told everyone to shut up as he's obviously taunting them, to not indulge him. She then told Wei to speak. Wei understood that Queen Tao didn't have the means to wield a Haishu pack. He asked what master did he serve, who controls them. Queen Tao said nothing. Then someone else answered, ordering Zilu, one of the Haishu pack, to stay their sword. Zilu did so, and Queen Tao asked if this was wise to do so. The newcomer wasn't worried, as they were destined to be swept away by the morning dew anyway. His attitude was clearly a fatalistic one, so he didn't mind telling... Well, he didn't mind them witnessing him, and Jia Zichun recognized him, as it did Honglu, and he introduced himself as Ji Hua of the Shi family, seeing himself as a very prominent candidate to the family hierarch throne. Jia Zichun questioned Shi Jihua's claim as being prominent. He saw her search for the River of Immortality as wasting time. Jia Zichun didn't even know where to begin with refuting his brain-dead accusation. She saw him as way beneath her, not even wanting to address him as her senior, asking who was in charge of this. Was it Jia Huan? Yes, he would be a prime suspect, as he's working for Encore, the main competitor of Limbus Company. She doubted that he's ever been interested in him. Shi Jihua seemed to take offense to this, asking what she's talking about. Jia Zichun was asking whose teeth was he suckling on to gain control of the Mile branch, because he lacks the means to control them by his own merits. This really off that narcissist, calling her a little twerp. She asked if he's sure that he wants to insult her height where he's standing. Then Qing Tao addressed Shi Jihua as master. Dante understood that the mastermind of that operation wasn't anyone important. Otis agreed, as just looking at the traitor, she could tell that he was just a deceiver. Shi Jihua saw this as wasting time, ordering Zilu, the leader of that group of the Mao branch, to cut them all down. Zilu told him that the mission was to assassinate them, not to meet them in open battle, and take the lives of the hierarch candidates. This was not part of the contract. He didn't give a and ordered them to do so. Zilu also added that fighting to protect his life was also part of the contract, but no more than that can be done. Ahaishu... Well, they heed no voices but that of the one that holds the leash. It was clear to Dante that the one holding the leash was not Shi Jihua. Getting even more annoyed by what they were saying, seeing that the Haishu pack that he had was useless, they couldn't even get a simple job done. Zilu was silent at this. Qing Tao reminded him that they were merely a backup plan. Their true strategy involves... Then Shi Jihua remembered what that strategy was, and agreed that was the case. Seeing it is fine, he had other plans to sweep them all away. Faust understood that there's an emphasis on sweep and other variations of the word. Ishmael understood what this meant, asking if he bribed the sweepers. Now this silenced Shi Jihua and Qing Tao. Faust saw that while they were suspicious looking, their reactions suggested this is an impossibility. The only ones that can control the sweepers were the head. Ishmael agreed with her on that. Faust also reminded her that they're prohibited from touching, never mind entering any designated residential areas during the night in the backstreets. This was a permanent taboo of the head, one of the very first to be introduced. It took a lot of red tape to ensure that Mephistopheles was recognized as a residential vehicle, to ensure that they were safe during this time. Shi Jihua confirmed this. This made them anxious for nothing. Souring the mood, telling his group to leave, he only intended to have them see his face. The narcissist looked deranged as he said that he won't even remember them in a few days once they're swept away, laughing in a deranged way. Qing Tao cautioned him, then Zilu advised leaving before any more unnecessary words are said. Dante agreed with Faust on this. They were acting too suspicious to not have some scheme ready. to the point where they might be using reverse psychology to make them walk into their trap. Then there's the solution that usually works. Dante talked to Faust, who was about to suggest something first, but they were way ahead of her. Then she called for Ursus, who came to them. They pointed out that they had the Damned Dozen along with Jia Zichun and Wei on their side. Not seeing the Mao branch is willing to fight, not unless Shi Juha was directly threatened, which means that the only enemies to fight are Shi Jiha, Qingtao and Zilu, who will defend the first one as part of the contract. They have the numerical advantage. Urtis was in agreement with them. Shi Jihua, of course, didn't understand Dante's side of the conversation. Qingtao understood what was coming, and found a safe place to hide, while also looking for a change of underwear. Honglu looks like he had something to say, and Dante asked if he had something to say about this. He had a hard time recalling something about this, as he wasn't a part of his family. He was Jihua of the Shi family. Dante asked if he didn't just announce that earlier. Dante's plan was to get him and beat his motives out of him, asking if he's fine with that. Honglu was okay with that. He wasn't of his family, and he was sure that he'd answer their questions. Dante then, as his and their commander, they thought he should say something cool to start off the battle. This was most pleasing to Honglu, as it'd be straight out of a story. Apparently Urtis said that even if one side has the advantage in battle, the commander's words may be the deciding factor on who wins and loses. So they borrowed a few words from a book that Honglu once lent them. Well, it was a general who said it, and he said, which Dante quoted, "Destroy them all!" Seriously, what was Honglu reading? Shonen manga? Anyway, they tried to go after Shi Jihua, but Zilu, as her terms of the contract required that she defend him. She has the same vulnerabilities to slash and resistance to blunt as the others of her branch, along with relying on rupture and haste. But she is much more durable and more powerful. She also has the curse-writ blink step attack, which was unbreakable. She will prioritize the slowest as her primary targets to maximize her coin power bonus and coin reuse with one of her attacks. But once she's at 60% HP or less, the wave will end and something else will happen. Heathcliff heard something, a strange tune, crashing through the sound of that fierce battle, familiar electric dance music. Then someone said, "Finally." It was revealed to be Big Brother Ricardo of the Middle, who had been pursuing them since the Great Lake. They led him on with that chase and got him farther into the world of the Bristly. He then read out from the Book of Vengeance, which might as well be a set of vindictive pronouncements directed at any one person. Specifically, Title 2, Section 11, Row C, the punishment of those who dare to flee from the Middle's retribution, begins by tearing their legs from the groin. How petty is this? He wanted to make them all suffer for the time that they wasted. Heathcliff asked what he's doing there. Well, he wants retribution for the hair salon coupons that you stole from him, and couldn't use anyway. He asked what was wrong with him. He's been stalking them all along. Ricardo didn't see it as stalking, as he's a thief who banished him from the world of the luscious thanks to him stealing his hair salon coupons. Seriously, he has the mentality of a taxman. I mean, just because he takes the warp train to get a great distance from you, and it's unclear where you went, that means nothing to these people. They'll find you. Well, it's a combination of a taxman and a Warhammer Fantasy Dwarf. Now, with Warhammer Fantasy Dwarves, if you so much as make a slight on them, they'll want payback. Ji-Ha made it clear that they are not part of this plan. Jia Zichun understood that Limbus Company were people off left and right. Well, it was Heathcliff that did that before the La Mancha Land mission. Ji-Ha ordered Zilu to take them out. Zilu saw him as an utterly insular fool. He didn't take this well. Zilu asked if he didn't know that man. Jia Zichun asked what the middle was doing there. Dante knew. He was Ricardo, big brother of the middle, the man who slaughtered the damned dozen like they were nothing. He almost forced Dante to self-destruct, all because Heathcliff stole from his safe in Marlin Port. Dante asked if they had to, ready to self-destruct again. Faust said, not yet. According to what was determined during their checkup, they've grown stronger since the last time they fought Ricardo. They had a greater chance of winning, so they shouldn't give up before the fight even begins. Roger asked by how much. Faust told them that it was enough to put their faith in uncertainties. Ricardo told them to stop the background noise. He doesn't know what their business was with those thieves, seeing the others of the damned dozen as accessories to Heathcliff's actions, and even Dante. He's personally travelled all the way to the eastern part of the city because he had to exact his vengeance against Heathcliff with his own hands. Clearly, while the Indigo Elder's weapon caused serious injury, it wasn't enough to result in the necessity of a prosthetic. He could have left that task to his brothers and sisters in the east and let them handle it, but this wasn't acceptable to him. He needed to deal with this personally, even if it meant asking a great brother/sister of the east for a favour, which explains how he was able to locate them. Even though, when they boarded the warp train, they could have ended up anywhere in the city. Likely wanting info on where they were, so he and his forces can use the warp train themselves to cut them off. Ricardo called Ji-Ha a half-pint and his cute mini entourage, telling them to get out of his sight. Their vengeance comes first. Now, the smart move would be to get out of the way as, why stop the middle from killing them? Worst case scenario, they go in there, they get butchered, and the damned dozen will be much weaker. Best case scenario, they go in there, they butcher the damned dozen, and you let them go on their way. Either way, it helps out, but sadly, Ji-Ha was a narcissist and couldn't tolerate being treated like this. Telling him to keep babbling his fat lip of his, calling him a minion of the fingers, telling him that he doesn't scare him at all with his cheap hairdo and his garish botched dye job. He's in District 8 turf now. He is... Ricardo gave nothing away to begin with, and Heathcliff saw this messed up. Embrace the moment, Heathcliff. You're no longer the stupid one. Urtis saw that Ji-Ha was so absorbed in his own foolishness to see that he's walking into his own demise. This provoked surprise in Ricardo. He was absorbed in thoughts. He saw this as impressive. A new record. Ji-Ha is the current record holder. Yes, the current record holder for how fast can I get written up in Ricardo's Book of Vengeance challenge. And he did it in 15 seconds. He then, with trembling hands, likely due to fury, he reached down to grab the Book of Vengeance, opening it, and began to write something down on the paper. slowly and deliberately, as though to make each stroke of the pen count. His audacity is unfortunately terminal. He'll rip his jaws apart himself as punishment. He told his little brothers to not let the others get away while he deals with Shi Jihua, who didn't know what he was talking about and ordered Zilu to protect him from that hole. He did so as this was part of her contract. He cared not about who was stopping him. She was welcome to try, though. Effective immediately, all involved parties and bystanders there would be subject to complete and total extermination. Well, no change there for Dante and the damned dozen. Sinclair believed that they could slip away in that mess. Dante didn't think that they could, as while Ricardo charged towards Zilu and Shi Jihua, the little brothers surrounded them as ordered. Ishmael told them to ready their weapons. Payback time for what happened at the Great Lake. She had a score to settle with Ricardo. They then fought the little brothers of the middle. They were weak to blunt and strong against slash. They relied more on paralysis, and if they had shield when blocking, next time they'll attack harder. They also cause more damage and gain a plus coin boost if one of their own is killed, and can gain up to 2 minus coin boosts if they lose a clash. They can only attack the stagger threshold and deal 20 SP with certain attacks. After they took out many of the little brothers, Dante saw Ricardo coming with an explosive noise. He landed before them. Ricardo had heard that the Haishu of the East were tough, but Zilu was something else. He asked why she left the fight. He didn't see it as his immediate problem. He's getting written... Well, he and Zilu were getting written down in the book to deal with later. He's there to deliver a beatdown to the coupon thieves. Faust was right. Yes, she was indeed right. Much has changed since the Great Lake, as Ricardo actually has a clear amount of HP. He's accompanied by little brother Werner. They both inflict vendetta marks on enemies when hit by them, which gives up to 2 clash power, and if they have 8, they can have up to 3 more base power. If Werner has a usable counter. Yes, if he has a usable counter, he can't be staggered. He can also weaken an enemy's damage and defense if hit by one of his attacks. He can also bind them to slow them and weaken their attack power. As for the counter, it generates a shield for each vendetta mark. Now, Ricardo, he's all about paralysis. One attack inflicts bind and attack power down, and he attacks SP with more than one of his available attacks. He can also summon more little brothers with one of his attacks, and with one attack he can get a buff to a buff to blunt damage next turn. One of his attacks also inflicts fragile and adds damage based on the vendetta marks at the cost of removing them. And if the target has 3 or more vendetta marks, that attack becomes unbreakable. His block heals his allies of 10 SP, and it can also reset their SP to 0 if they're at minus 45 SP, while also buffing everyone's blunt power. Then there's the attack on all, which increases in final power by 5 if 5 or more vendetta marks are on the main targets. While this is a tough fight, it's not as one-sided as the last time. Although he can heal by 10 SP at the turn start and take 20% less damage from status effects. He gains a damage boost the next turn whenever he or an ally is hit. and he inflicts 2 vendetta marks on whoever kills one of his allies. Although, once he's weakened by 60% HP, and this was at the start of that battle with him, due to him fighting Zulu, and once he's at 20% HP, the battle will end. It might have been desperate for those involved in this battle, but something worse is heading towards them. Until next time, hail the rabbit!